Hello, you're watching movie snapshot scenes, and this is the summary of The Social Network. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It all began with a breakup. In the fall of 2003, Mark Zuckerberg, a socially awkward but fiercely intelligent Harvard sophomore, sat across the table from his girlfriend Erica Albright. The conversation quickly turned sour. Mark, arrogant and obsessed with status, made a series of tone-deaf remarks about final clubs, Harvard's elite social organizations. Frustrated by his condescension, Erica ended the relationship and walked away, leaving Mark stunned and humiliated. That night, fueled by anger and alcohol, Mark returned to his dorm room and began blogging about the breakup. But venting wasn't enough. His emotions quickly turned into code. In a flurry of hacking and programming, Mark created a website called FaceMash. The premise was simple: compare the photos of two female Harvard students side by side and let users vote on who was more attractive. Mark hacked into the university's student directories to gather photos and launched the site within hours. FaceMash went viral overnight. Thousands of students flocked to it, crashing Harvard's network and sparking outrage across campus, especially among the women whose images had been used without consent. Mark was soon called before Harvard's administrative board. Though disciplined, he wasn't expelled. His punishment was light, but the scandal made his name known. More importantly, it got the attention of three upperclassmen, Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss, identical twins and Olympic rowers, and their business partner, Divya Narendra. The Winklevoss twins approached Mark with an idea. They were building a social networking site exclusive to Harvard students called Harvard Connection. They needed someone to program it, and after seeing what Mark had done with FaceMash, they believed he was the perfect fit. Mark agreed to help, but while he attended their meetings and discussed the project, something else was brewing in his mind, something bigger. What if he created a platform where Harvard students could connect, share, and network, not just based on looks, but on social identity, a digital version of the elite college social scene, something real, something that mattered? He began coding a new project on the side, keeping the Winklevosses in the dark. With the help of his friend Eduardo Saverin, who provided the initial seed funding and became the business partner and CFO, Mark launched the Facebook. In early 2004, the site exploded in popularity almost instantly within Harvard. Within weeks, it expanded to other Ivy League schools. What began as an emotional reaction to rejection was evolving into one of the most powerful digital platforms ever conceived. But behind the success, conflict was brewing. Because as Facebook grew, so did the resentment of those who felt betrayed. And Mark would soon find himself in a storm of lawsuits, broken friendships, and moral ambiguity. The revolution had begun, and it all started with a girl, a keyboard, and a grudge. With the Facebook now live on Harvard's network, Mark Zuckerberg's idea had taken flight. The concept was simple yet brilliant. Each user had a profile with photos and personal details, and could connect with friends by sending and accepting requests. It mimicked the exclusivity and social cachet of Harvard's elite clubs, but digitized it for everyone with a .edu email. The platform spread like wildfire. Within days, hundreds of Harvard students signed up. Within weeks, students at Yale, Columbia, and Stanford were begging to get on board. Mark was no longer just a tech-savvy outcast. He had tapped into something powerful: the need to be seen, to be known, to belong. Meanwhile, Eduardo Saverin, Mark's roommate and the site's co-founder, was keeping up his end of the deal. He invested $1,000 to help launch the site, handled the business and advertising side, and tried to temper Mark's increasingly obsessive coding marathons. Though he didn't fully grasp the technical side of the project, Eduardo believed in Mark. He believed in their friendship, but not everyone felt the same way. Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss, along with Divya Narendra, were furious when they discovered that the Facebook had launched just weeks after their last meeting with Mark. They believed he had stolen their idea, delayed their project intentionally, and used their concept as a foundation for his own. Their anger was justified, but Harvard's administration brushed off their complaints. The twins, frustrated but determined, began considering legal action. Back in their dorm room, Mark and Eduardo kept expanding the site. They rented servers, added new features, and opened access to more universities. Mark refused to let advertisers, onto the platform, arguing it would ruin the user experience. Eduardo disagreed. He saw business potential and they needed revenue to keep growing. The tension between them began to show. Everything changed when Sean Parker entered the picture. Sean, the co-founder of Napster, was a tech world celebrity, brilliant, charming, and impulsive. He reached out to Mark after discovering the Facebook, impressed by its potential. When they met in person, Sean dazzled Mark with stories of Silicon Valley, venture capital, and billion-dollar dreams. He also planted a seed. Drop just Facebook. It's cleaner. Sean immediately saw what Facebook could become. He warned Mark that Eduardo was too cautious, too conventional. "You don't need a guy who wears a suit and tie," Sean said. "You need someone who thinks big." Mark was listening. As the platform scaled rapidly and Sean Parker's influence grew, Eduardo began to sense something slipping away. The company he had helped build, his best friend's loyalty, was beginning to feel like it belonged to someone else. The foundation was growing stronger, but the cracks had already started to show. As Facebook expanded, so did the complexity of the relationships behind it. What started as a dorm room collaboration between two friends was morphing into something much larger and much more volatile. Mark Zuckerberg, now increasingly influenced by Sean Parker, had begun to look beyond Harvard. With Parker's guidance, Mark set his sights on Silicon Valley, the tech epicenter where the real giants lived and played. Sean had a vision, and Mark, captivated by the dream of building something world-changing, followed it. Eduardo Savarino, meanwhile, remained in New York, trying to secure advertisers and establish financial footing for the company. He was still the CFO, still the co-founder, but his grip on Facebook's future was slipping. Communication between him and Mark grew sparse. While Eduardo talked spreadsheets and revenue models, Sean talked disruption and domination. It wasn't hard to see which voice Mark was beginning to trust more. Despite the growing rift, Eduardo continued to invest in the company. He put forward $18,000 of his own money, formalized the business into a Delaware corporation, and signed paperwork that made Mark CEO. But the devil was in the details, and Eduardo didn't realize that the terms of their agreement could later be manipulated. Meanwhile, Facebook's growth was explosive. From Ivy League schools to universities across the country, thousands of students signed up daily. It wasn't just a trend, it was becoming a cultural phenomenon. Everyone wanted in. Mark, living and working out of a makeshift house office in Palo Alto with Sean and a few other programmers, pushed the platform forward with relentless focus. But while Mark was building a kingdom, Eduardo was being slowly edged out of it. The breaking point came when Eduardo traveled to California to confront Mark and Sean. He was shocked to discover that Sean had moved into a leadership role without ever earning an official title. Eduardo's frustration boiled over. He froze Facebook's business account temporarily, trying to force Mark to communicate. It didn't work. Shortly after, Eduardo was presented with new stock agreements. Without realizing it, he signed papers that diluted his ownership from 34% to less than 1%. Mark's shares and Sean's increased. Eduardo had been legally pushed out of the company he helped create. He slammed Mark's laptop on the table in the Facebook offices in a final rage-fueled confrontation. "You better lawyer up," he said, "because I'm not coming back for 30%. I'm coming back for everything." The friendship was shattered. The company, however, kept rising. Behind the clean blue and white interface of Facebook, betrayal and ambition had written their own code, one that was far more complex than any algorithm, and the lawsuits had only just begun. As Facebook's user count surged into the millions, the lawsuits multiplied. Eduardo Savarino wasn't the only one who felt betrayed. Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss, along with Divya Narendra, had officially filed suit against Mark Zuckerberg, accusing him of intellectual property theft and breach of contract. They claimed Facebook was their idea, born from the blueprint of Harvard Connection, and that Mark had deliberately strung them along before launching his own version behind their backs. Mark denied it all. To him, Facebook was his creation, his vision, his code, his execution. He admitted to leading the twins on, but insisted the idea of a social networking site wasn't unique enough to be owned. "If you guys were the inventors of Facebook," he famously snapped, "you'd have invented Facebook." But legal battles aren't won by sound bites. And both lawsuits, Savarino's and the Winklevosses, progressed through the courts, revealing layer upon layer of betrayal, manipulation, and ego. As the legal teams combed through emails, contracts, and testimonies, Mark remained largely detached. His focus stayed on growth, innovation, and expansion. Facebook was no longer a college phenomenon. It was becoming a global empire. But for all his genius, Mark had become increasingly isolated. The deeper he went into building the future, the more he seemed cut off from the present. Sean Parker, meanwhile, was enjoying his moment in the spotlight. He dazzled investors, helped secure a crucial round of funding from Peter Thiel, and celebrated as Facebook's valuation climbed into the hundreds of millions. He positioned himself as the cool, visionary co-founder, even though his official title remained vague. But Sean's reckless lifestyle soon caught up with him. During a wild party at a beach house in California, police raided the property and arrested Sean for possession of cocaine. Though the charges didn't stick, the damage was done. Mark, faced with mounting pressure from investors, had to make a decision. The board voted. Sean was out. The fall of Parker was quiet, but symbolic. The man who had helped take Facebook to the next level had been consumed by the very culture he helped create. Fast, flashy, and ultimately unstable. Back in the legal world, Eduardo's position grew stronger. His lawyers revealed how his shares had been unfairly diluted and how Mark had systematically cut him out. In response, Facebook settled. The terms were never publicly disclosed, but Eduardo's name was reinstated on the masthead as co-founder. The Winklevoss twins also eventually reached a settlement, though they walked away unsatisfied, believing they had been outplayed by someone far more ruthless than they imagined. By the end of it all, Mark stood alone at the top. He had built one of the most powerful communication tools in human history, but the cost was clear: friendship, loyalty, trust. In the pursuit of greatness, Mark had sacrificed everything that once made Facebook personal, and the question remained, was it worth it? As the lawsuit settled and the dust began to clear, Mark Zuckerberg remained exactly where he wanted to be, at the helm of one of the fastest-growing companies in the world. Facebook was now valued in the hundreds of millions, its reach expanding to universities, high schools, and eventually to the general public. Every click, every friend request, every wall post brought it closer to becoming the digital heartbeat of a generation. But success had come at a cost. The friendships that once anchored Mark, especially his bond with Eduardo Saverin, had disintegrated. In deposition rooms, lawyers dissected memories and intentions, and Mark, now a figure of both admiration and suspicion, found himself defending decisions he barely seemed to remember making. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about character. The depositions became the framing device of the story, two separate legal battles happening in parallel. On one side, the Winklevoss twins and Divya Narendra. On the other, Eduardo. Mark sat in both rooms, rarely emotive, often distant. His responses were clipped, technical. He didn't see betrayal. He saw strategy, optimization, progress. But not everyone shared his view. Through the testimonies, a more human picture of Mark began to emerge. Not just the cold genius, but the socially isolated young man desperate to belong. At Harvard, he had craved status. Not wealth, necessarily, but recognition. The final clubs, the elite inner circles, they had excluded him. Facebook, in a way, had been his answer to that rejection, a place where he controlled who was in and who wasn't. Back in the present, with the legal proceedings nearing their conclusions, Mark remained isolated. He didn't party like Sean Parker. He didn't fight with the charisma of the Winklevoss twins. He simply worked, relentlessly, coding, updating, growing. But the loneliness was undeniable. In one of the film's most poignant closing scenes, Mark sits alone in a conference room after the depositions. His lawyer, Marilyn Delpy, offers a small, human insight. "You're not an asshole, Mark. You're just trying so hard to be." It's the closest thing to warmth he receives in the entire film, and he doesn't know how to respond. After she leaves, Mark opens his laptop and logs into Facebook. He pulls up Erica Albright's profile, the girl from the beginning, the one who had walked away before it all began. He sends her a friend request, and then he waits, refreshing the page again and again. The creator of the world's most powerful social network, A man with access to millions of users and infinite data was now just a boy alone with a screen, hoping someone, somewhere, might accept him. The courtroom battles eventually ended, not with dramatic victories, but with settlements and signatures. Eduardo Saverin walked away with his name restored on Facebook's founding documents and a substantial financial stake in the company he helped build. The Winklevoss twins received millions in stock, though their resentment endured. Everyone involved got something, but no one walked away whole. Mark Zuckerberg, meanwhile, moved forward, faster than anyone could follow. In the years that followed, the events of the film, Facebook became a titan. What began as a social tool for Ivy League students became a global force, redefining how humans communicate, connect, and consume information. Mark led the charge with cold precision, never losing. Focus on scale, efficiency, and innovation. He was praised as a genius, condemned as ruthless, and labeled everything from visionary to villain. But The Social Network isn't a story about Facebook's algorithms or market strategies. It's about people, relationships, the fragile fabric of trust that frays when ambition overtakes empathy. The film ends not with Mark's triumph, but with his stillness. He sits in the quiet after the storm, refreshing Erica Albright's Facebook page, waiting for a response that may never come. It's a moment of haunting simplicity. The man who revolutionized digital connection is unable to reconnect with the one person he perhaps most wronged. And that's the paradox. Mark built a network to bring people together, yet ended up profoundly alone. The friends he once relied on, Eduardo, Dustin, even Sean, were left behind, casualties of a vision too big to share. His creation connected the globe, but severed the ties closest to him. The irony isn't lost on the audience. Throughout the film, we see the difference between invention and humanity. Mark's code was flawless, his interface elegant, his strategy relentless. But people aren't programs. They don't always respond to logic. They want loyalty, sincerity, connection without conditions. And those were the things Mark struggled to understand. The final frame lingers. Mark, staring at the screen, hoping. It's not a fall from grace, nor a rise to power. It's a pause, a moment of reflection in the life of a man who changed the world, but couldn't navigate his own heart. What The Social Network reveals is that genius doesn't guarantee happiness, that brilliance can build empires, but not always relationships, that in the pursuit of something revolutionary, something essential may be lost. Mark Zuckerberg became the youngest billionaire in history, but the film leaves us asking, at what cost?